Good afternoon. Could we get started here, ladies and gentlemen? Could you take your seats? Thank you very much. Welcome to Labor and Commerce Sub 3. We have a good number of bills today, but I'm hoping nothing that's going to turn this into one of our patented marathons. So if we could, everyone find our seats, we'll get started. This is an experienced group here. I recognize almost every face, so I don't think I need to go through the ground rules of how we'll conduct the meetings. We'll conduct them as we always have, which is as efficiently as possible. One bit of housekeeping. There are two bills on our list today which are going to take by for the day. That's HB 1588 from Delegate Williams and HB 2087, that's it, from Delegate Shin. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Bye for the day. Okay, is Delegate LaVere Bowling here? Let's start with Delegate LaVere Bowling's HB 1935. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I do have line amendments that I believe are available online, and if the clerk can confirm and or report them, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Delegate, the amendments add 2 representatives to the task force, a representative of the residential construction industry, and a representative from a firm based in the Commonwealth and specializing in residential and commercial building energy performance, building diagnostics, or energy code compliance. And then there's a technical amendment about the exact number 12 members.
Yes, thank you.
Is there a motion to accept?
Move to accept the amendments.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The amendment's before us. Delegate.
Thank you. HB 1935 directs the Department of Housing and Community Development to establish, in collaboration with Department of Energy, along with the Department of Social Services the Income Qualified Energy Efficiency and Weatherization Task Force to evaluate ways to coordinate government and utility services and resources to more effectively deliver energy efficient housing, weatherization resources, and energy efficiency upgrades for low-income individuals and households across the Commonwealth. We know that we all experience within our districts folks that have high utility bills that are forcing Virginians to choose between essentials like groceries, medication, or keeping their home safe at a great temperature during hot summers and cold winters. So this bill is going to require the task force to develop a comprehensive plan for the state to provide weatherization and energy efficiency upgrades to those households by December 31st of 2033. And I will stop talking because you have a lot on the docket, but I do have some experts here who can speak to the bill if we have questions, comments, and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any questions from members of the panel for Delegate LaVere Bowling? Hearing none. Is there anyone in the audience?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I
Delegate
just pushed
Quinn.
my button late. I have a question for the patron.
Delegate?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask, so I know that some of the programs that utilities provide now, whether, it's, phase 1 or phase 2 or whatever, how would this differ from what they already provide?
So this is going to bring forth a report. The task force is going to do a report to evaluate the programs that we currently have and give recommendations on what should also be occurring in addition to what the state also provides already in our utilities.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Delegate O'Quinn.
So then theoretically, they may come back and say they need to add a couple of things. They may come back and say in some cases it's already sufficient. I mean, it could be anywhere in between.
Correct. It could be either or.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Delegate LaVere Bowling? Okay, is there anyone in the audience here to testify in favor of this bill? Why don't you come on down and please line up so you're ready when someone's finished. I'm not at the moment inclined to put a time limit or a timer on you, but brevity is enjoined.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ben Hoyne, Climate Equity Working Group. Thank the patron for bringing the bill forward. She really covered it. You know, I would just say we would hope we wouldn't really have to do this, but to somewhat answer the delegate's question, we don't know what we'll find out, but we want to bring all the stakeholders together, the utilities, government agencies, other stakeholders, as mentioned in this task force, to develop the best plan forward, to get rid of any bottlenecks that might be there, make sure we have sufficient and stable workforce, access and leverage federal funding and all the other things to really deliver energy efficiency to the folks that need it across the Commonwealth. Thank you. Urge you to support the bill.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy. We do
I'm
support.
sorry, Seven Hills?
Yes, sir. Seven Hills Strategy Group. It's a
What is it? Seven
wonderful
Hills
new
Strategy
firm.
Group.
It is a budding, fantastic new consulting firm. And we're so happy to be here representing such wonderful clients.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. But I'm happy to say we do support this bill, and we would absolutely welcome the focus on these issues.
Mr. Chair, my name is Jimmy Lee Jarvis. I'm with Progress Virginia, and we support the bill for all the reasons stated.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Blair St. Ledger Olson with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. First and foremost, the most affordable energy is the energy we don't have to use, and for those reasons, we support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Victoria Higgins, Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, and briefly, we support the bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Josephus Allman with the Southern Environmental Law Center, and thanks to the patron for bringing the bill. We support.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tanisha Griffin, and I'm the environmental policy analyst with New Virginia Majority, and we also support the bill and thank the patron for bringing it forward.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Peter Anderson with Appalachian Voices. We thank Delegate Olivia Bowling for her leadership. We support the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Dana Wiggins with the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and we thank the patron for the bill. We're supportive, and this is the next step on behalf of all of the work that's happened with Energy Efficiency for All and the Dominion Stakeholder Group, the APCO Stakeholder Group on energy efficiency. We hope this will take everything to the next level and actually move everything forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Laura Gonzalez with Clean Virginia, and we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Keith Martin with Appalachian Power. We're in support of the bill as well. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Amores for the Natural Resources Defense Council. Appreciate the patrons' hard work on this bill, and we support it as well.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience here to testify against the bill? Okay, it's back to the committee. Is there any further discussion or questions from members of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Delegate Herring.
Move to report with amendment.
Second. I have a motion to report with amendment. Properly second. The clerk, please. Any discussion on that? Clerk, please open the roll.
A mediator as well. That's what he did in his career. It's hilarious. He's probably like, oh, God.
Clerk, please close the roll. The bill reports with amendment by a vote of 8-2.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Olivia Bowling. Delegate Laufer.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and subcommittee members. I'm talking about HB 2003. I am working with stakeholders for some language changes, but I just thought I'd take the moment to explain what HB 2003 seeks to accomplish. HB 2003 is a bill about the ratepayers, the transparency they deserve to understand what they are paying for when they pay their electric bill. Virginia is one of 13 states and DC that are served by the Regional Transmission Organization, RTO, known as PJM. PJM manages the regional electric grid, including ensuring grid reliability, maintaining the transmission system, and preparing for new energy sources. PJM is the largest RTO in the United States. It is the agency that sells energy to energy transmission companies in Virginia. They are responsible for the energy supply to 65 million people and in control of over a $100 billion industry. PJM policies are largely driven and decided by its members. the electricity generators and transmission utilities, including those in Virginia. The decision-making process occurs with a series of meetings similar to the General Assembly, a series of lower meetings that progress to larger Uber meetings. In the PJM structure, however, the votes in the lower meetings, similar to our subcommittee right here today, are not recorded. And let me just say that again, the votes are not recorded. This is the issue HB 2003 seeks to fix, making these votes public. PJM does publish the upper level meeting votes, but we know that the policies and proposals voted on in the lower level meetings have a large impact on what happens at the upper level meetings, which again will directly impact 65 million ratepayers and importantly, the ratepayers of Virginia. By the way, I think many of you remember that in the General Assembly, the subcommittee meeting votes were not recorded just a couple years ago. And Virginians demanded that they know what was being decided at these meetings. And as all you know, we now record the votes and we also public stream the meetings. So it's not a new concern, and we know we can provide a fix. And this secrecy is becoming more and more scrutinized for a variety of reasons, but here's just a couple. PJM has increased their rates by 182% in the last decade, and a recent ruling just occurred on December 5th that FERC issued a civil penalty of $6.6 million to the New Jersey utility for fraud. This is not a ruling against PJM, but was noted that PJM essentially performed no independent oversight whatsoever on the issue, and FERC reported that they believe the lack of transparency from PJM created the fraud in New Jersey. Furthermore, as our own energy needs are growing with data centers, ratepayers deserve to know that the rate they are paying for their energy is not subsidizing large industry. And we're not alone in wanting more transparency and clarity on this important industry. We're joined with 5 states last year and 3 states just so far this year introducing legislation similar to this to demand accountability. I hope it's the will of the committee to act favorably on HB 2003.
Thank you, Delegate Lawfer. Is there any question from the member of the panel of Delegate Lawfer? Delegate Gilbert.
Mr. Chair. Delegate, you used the word secrecy. Are these meetings in fact held in secret, or are they otherwise open to the public or broadcast or online?
I can actually provide the operating manual here. So I have the meeting chart, like their flow chart, as well as so the meetings are held. None of the votes are public. And actually in their own manual, they say, if I can quote it if you don't mind, we shall not disseminate to the general public detailed transcriptional meeting notes, shall not create video, audio, or online recording or transcription of meetings for all subcommittees, task force, and committees other than the MC and MRC, which are the Uber meetings. It is understood that participants shall not be quoted by the media by name or organization. And voting reports on all votes taken at PJM member committee meetings are the only votes, not at any other forums.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't have anyone else in the queue. Any other questions for Delegate Lawfer from members of the panel? Let's go to the audience. Is there anyone in the audience here to testify in favor of this bill?
Mr. Chair, member of the committee, I'm Carmen Bingham with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. I am the program coordinator for the Affordable Clean Energy Project. We basically look at the regulatory process here in Virginia and what does affect the cost of our electricity systems and our gas systems here in Virginia. We support this bill because transparency is important. The important piece of this legislation is that the PJM votes, while their meetings are not held in secret, the votes are not recorded, and therefore if you are not physically present at that meeting, you are not aware of what happens. And so that transparency needs to be open to us, and we need to be aware of what decisions are being made at PJM that do affect our rates here in Virginia. The case that Delegate Lawfer recently quoted that had recently happened was there's an additional fine of $546 million that are going to be imposed upon the New Jersey ratepayers on top of the cost of the project that PJM approved. So that is in addition to the cost of the project that they are already paying for And then this fine is on top of that. So all those costs are put on the ratepayers without any transparency as to why they have to foot the bill for, we'll just say, mismanagement of the utility company. So we hope that you'll pass this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I am Laura Gonzalez with Clean Virginia. We support this bill. With the soaring data center demand and the unprecedented billionaire investments required in transmission infrastructure, one key way policymakers can ensure ratepayer dollars are spent wisely is giving the state regulator access to utilities votes in the regional transmission organization, PJM. The regulator, with this information, then can make sure that utilities are not voting against the public interest and against cost-effective solutions that could lower costs and guarantee affordability. And for those reasons, we support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Bob Shippey with Sierra Club. More transparency seems like a good idea, and I hope you move the bill forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Shippey. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to testify against the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy. And we appreciate the delegate being so generous with her time in talking with us and considering our proposed amendments. And we understand how the body voted on this bill last year, but our concerns with the bill do remain. I think primarily we want to ensure that this quest for transparency doesn't ultimately hamper collaboration. And the delegate cited from the manual, and I just want to read to you a line from that same manual, that recognizing that the stakeholder process is most productive when participants can freely discuss the wide range of complex issues that are before them, meeting participants and observers are asked to take great care in reporting the proceedings accurately and to take all comments in their intended context. And that's what we would ask here. These lower committee meetings are meetings of technical experts, of subject matter experts who are dealing with some of the meatiest issues that the nation is grappling with. And so in order for them to be able to speak freely and think through these really complex topics, they need to not be concerned that ultimately the way that they speak or present an issue is going to come back to bite ultimately their boss. And so I would just ask you to consider that as a potential unintended consequence. And we'd also ask that this bill apply equally to all entities that either generate or have transmission in the Commonwealth or sell to end-use retail customers in the Commonwealth, as I'm not sure that it's ultimately a level playing field to have just one participant in these very complex conversations sort of laying their cards on the table in every instance such that everybody else can see them and is not held to the same standard. So we do look forward to continuing this conversation with the patron, and we appreciate your listening today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Jacob Newton on behalf of Virginia's Electric Cooperatives. We appreciate the delegates' efforts to promote transparency in the PJM region. However, we have concerns with the unequal application of this legislation both inside and outside the Commonwealth of Virginia. It places regulated utilities in the Commonwealth at a disadvantage compared with all other PJM participants. PJM has over 500 voting members. This bill would only affect relatively about 5 of those voting members, and the decisions of PJM affecting Virginia's ratepayers would still be left in the hands of the other 99% of the voting members of PJM. A significant majority of PJM members are not even regulated utilities. These other suppliers and end-user customers substantially impact electricity rates in the Commonwealth, yet this legislation fails to address those roles and hold them to the same standards. For these reasons, we oppose the bill as drafted, but would like to continue working with the patron on additional language. We urge a more equitable approach and one that holds all PJM members to the same standard, ensuring transparency and accountability are applied uniformly across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. Jennifer Wally-Boyd on behalf of NOVAC. We would like to echo the comments of the previous speakers before us and respectfully oppose this bill at this time. However, we look forward to continuing to work with the patron. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Galen Creekmore, Central Virginia Electric Cooperative. As a constituent of Delegate Lawford, we want to thank her for engaging with the cooperatives. Our concern, obviously, is
we don't want Virginia's voice diminished by, you heard Mr. Newton refer to the 5 voting members this would affect in Virginia, and the others on PJM would not be affected. We wholeheartedly agree in more transparency at PJM as a not-for-profit electric utility and bringing those savings back home to the delegates district.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Keith Martin with Appalachian Power. As previously stated, the PJM stakeholder process was structured to encourage collaboration and consensus building. We're concerned that this will inhibit a lot of that, and so for those reasons, we oppose the bill.
Thank you, sir. No one else to testify against? Okay, the bill's back in the committee. Any questions or comments from members of the committee? Delegate Weber.
Mr. Chair, I guess this might be a question for Chrissy or somebody, but they mentioned that there's numerous other members that participate in the PJM process. How many other entities are there that participate in this process other than the incumbent utilities or a commission? Whoever has the answer.
No, I'm actually looking through my notes because I might have this in here.
You seem very well prepared.
Well, if you bring this up, you better be. Right?
Yeah, right?
You know, honestly, I do believe I have it in here. Sorry, I don't have it highlighted, and that is a problem. So can I get back to you with that information? What I can tell you is the meetings at the lower level actually are structured a little bit differently, whereas maybe one player could have actually, instead of having 1 vote, be equated to 10 votes. So that means sometimes it's only 1 entity, but in a lower vote, they actually have more say.
So then, further question, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So then, if votes are weighted, so for instance, if you have an incumbent utility that participates in transmission and then also participates in generation, but then you have other entities in that lower level that may say only participate in transmission, and they are weighted differently, but we don't know what their vote is. I feel like unless we're going to make the whole thing transparent. It's going to be, I think, some of the points where would we not be putting the incumbent utilities at kind of a disadvantage?
Actually, I think, Mr. Chairman, if I could respond to the delegate, this is exactly why I'm bringing this forward, because there's a lot of questions here that are not able to be answered easily because it's not public. And I don't want to put us at a disadvantage. Absolutely not. My goal is Virginia. But what I'm trying to say is we're not alone in this, trying to get transparency. We had 5 states last year, 3 states so far that are proposing this kind of legislation exactly because of what happened in New Jersey, which was the utility of New Jersey said they had 68 transition towers that needed to be replaced, when in fact they only needed 7. And they put that rate, the cost of that to the ratepayers. So I think these are great questions. I can get back to you because I do have a lot of information. But I think, Mr. Chairman.
One more question, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Weber.
So in regards to New Jersey, I don't know how New Jersey is regulated, but in regards to the Commonwealth, in the case, if we were to encounter something similar to New Jersey where the utilities are proposing to replace certain lines or whatever, a lot of that, would that not get caught or seen by our regulated body, the SEC, because they have to go over that in a rate case, I believe?
Mr. Chairman, response to the delegate, this is true. I think more information that the SEC has could also help them in what they're doing in their investigation. So this is true that we do have a body that investigates, but possibly having more information on the front end could help with their investigation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Lawfer, I had a question for you. There was a comment made by one of the members of the audience expressing a concern about putting a chill on the discussion and the conversation at the lowest. Is there anything in your bill that requires anyone who this would be applicable to disclose the conversations that happened and the negotiating that happened or the points that were made? Or is it just the votes they cast?
The report shall include, and this is line 173, And then 174, all recorded votes cast by the utility during the immediate preceding calendar year, regardless of whether the vote is otherwise disclosed. All votes cast by affiliate of the utility during the immediately preceding calendar year if the utility did not vote on the matter, regardless of whether the vote is otherwise disclosed. And a brief description explaining how each vote cast by the utility or its affiliate as appropriate is in the public interest. So there is at the very end there.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for Delegate Loffer? Committee operates by motion. Delegate Herring.
Move to report.
Second. I have a motion to report. Seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Clerk, please open the roll. Go ahead and close the roll, Mr. Clerk. The bill reports by a vote of 5 to 4. Thank you, Delegate Loffer. Committee will be at ease for a moment. Next is going to be Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move an amendment in the nature of a substitute, if that's all right.
Motion to accept the substitute. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a second. Can you describe it for us, Council?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The substitute amends the definition of high-load facility to apply to new facilities with a demand of 100 megawatts or more instead of 25 megawatts. And it also adds that the facility will have no material adverse effect on the incumbent utility to the list of what the Commission must find for approval. And then it also adds a 180-day time frame for a final order to be issued and an application fee.
Okay, I have a motion properly second to accept the substitute. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Substitutes before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, before you is HB 2027, which seeks to answer one of the largest problems, not only before this committee, but before the Commonwealth, at least for the next several years, if we're able to do something about it. And that has to do with not what kind of power we're going to generate or where we're going to put it, but something at the other end of the equation, but the load or the consumption end of our great power needs here in Virginia. If you were to pull the great JLARC report on data centers, and if you were to take out all the pages that dealt with data points related to load or consumption, you'd probably pull out a fifth of the whole report. But yet, if you look at the recommendations and policy choices, you would see very, very few related to consumption or load. And that's for a very understandable reason, is that the answer is innately political, not so much policy. It is a tough political choice that has to be made if we are going to live in a world, if you look at the chart from the JLARC report that talks about an unconstrained load environment where we have a 183% increase of load over the next few decades that is completely unsustainable and which JLARC calls a very, very difficult situation to achieve our Virginia Clean Economy Act goals. And then we have a half-constrained situation that JLAR considers difficult to achieve at best. So if we do nothing on the front end, we're never going to meet these goals. And that's what this bill is seeking to solve here, is what are we going to do at the front end to try and find some way to manage the load? Because we have a mismatch that is occurring in Virginia right now. We have localities, which of course should retain primacy over their land use decisions. But at the same time, they are turning on one by one many facilities that we can call, say, high load or high load use facilities that require an immense amount of power. And yet the state is required to manage that state resource, which is electric power. And so we have a mismatch. And so it's time, and what this bill seeks to do is to put an adult in the room, any entity really, that is answering that question of when is too much too much. And so let me get into the nitty-gritty of the bill and what that regime looks like. It would be a certificated program where we would put, and I'm so glad Representative Dominion Energy was able to speak so highly of the State Corporation Commission earlier. I appreciate that. That's exactly who we want to manage this situation, the true experts, the true adults in the room who are best equipped to make these decisions of how much load we should be placing on the grid. And that's exactly what this bill does. Whenever a new high energy use facility, as you can see, is defined at 100 megawatts threshold, which would then allow smaller users at 80 or 90, say a smaller data center or a chips factory that does not hit that threshold, would be unaffected by this regime. Again, trying to be pragmatic. We're not here to stifle any particular industry. We're here to try and protect Virginia's natural resources, meet our Clean Economy Act goals, and make sure that we are not overburdening the grid. Finally, the SEC, as you can see in several of the subparagraphs, would use a set of criteria from which to issue the certificate, and the certificate would go to the applicant, letting them know when they can hook up to the grid. That's kind of an oversimplification of a relatively difficult topic. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and I'm sure there's about 20 of my closest friends and frenemies behind me to help answer questions as well. But it is my hope that the committee will report the bill.
Thank you, Delegate Thomas. Members of the panel, any of you have any questions for Delegate Thomas? Delegate Weber?
Okay, yeah. All right, so what is, between this and the substitute, what are the major changes and why?
Yes. Happy to answer those. So if you look at lines 12 through 15, that's kind of what I spoke about with the 100 megawatts or greater. That was so we didn't become over-inclusive, capturing too many items that might throw a facility that's just not large enough to really create the concerns that we have about load on the grid. So 100 is like a hyperscale data center or a very large semiconductor. Again, it's not just one industry. So that was the reason for that. If you look at line 18, the word only was included. So that's to make sure that we're tightening the exact result that the SEC can produce there. If you look next lines 23 down to 26, you'll see the inclusion of no material adverse effects upon the incumbent electric utility's ability to comply with the applicable energy and environmental laws and regulations, including any obligation to retire electrical generating units. Essentially, that's making sure that we stay on track for our Clean Economy Act goals. If you go to lines 28 through 36, we added in, starting on the requirements of clauses Romanet 3 and Romanet 4 shall be deemed satisfied if the petition provides clear and convincing evidence that such high load facility will purchase a percentage of the high load facility's annual electrical load from a zero carbon resource located within PJM transmission region, measured on, and then it gives you 3 buckets from which you could try to achieve that. Essentially what that's trying to do is reward any of these petitioners, these applicants, if you will, that have tried to create on-site generation in a clean, carbon-free way. We want to be, again, pragmatic. There won't need to be as many transmission lines, which I know is an issue in the delegates' region, Mr. Chairman. And so that was the inclusion for that. And then I think finally, if we go down to E on line 50 and F on line 54, subsection E, the Commission shall issue its final order on a petition for a certificate. Again, we want to be sensitive to industry. We're not trying to target any one industry, and industry deserves to have a certain level of certainty. And so we wanted to put guardrails on this. So there's a 180-day limit from which to complete it. And then finally, Mr. Chairman, is on line 54, subsection F, the applicant for a certificate to operate a high-load facility shall be assessed a fee as prescribed by the Commission for the purpose of funding the costs of administering and enforcing the provisions of this section. We are dealing with very sophisticated parties here, Mr. Chairman, and we do not want to burden the state with the bureaucratic costs of administering this new regime, if that answers the delegate's question.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Weber.
Okay. Thank you very much for the walkthrough. I appreciate that. And thank you for making some of these changes. I guess my question is in regards to this, when would the entity apply for this in the commission during the process? Because, you've got entities that are looking at the Commonwealth and they're looking at areas, and you've got land that, needs rezoning, needs X, and they know that they're going to put it here. Would it be during the rezoning process? Would it be before they purchase the property? Would it be, or they've purchased the property and then they have to apply to the SEC because now they know they have a definitive place that the locality has given them the authority to do that? I mean, at what point would the entity apply to the SEC for their certificate?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great question. It's actually one that we talked about at length before submitting the bill. The reason that is not in here is I'm a free market guy. I love to let the market decide. So we're going to let these applicants choose on their own. They know they have a 6-month period from which they're going to get an answer. So if they want to do it at the beginning of the siting process in the particular locality they're applying in, they may. If they want to do it after just purchasing the land and not having it rezoned yet, again, they may. But we're going to let the free market decide how they want to address this regime on a case-by-case basis and leave it up to the market.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Weber. Any other members of the panel have a question for Delegate Thomas? Okay, let's go to the audience. Anyone here to testify in favor of this bill? Please come on down. Let's line up sort of close to the lectern so we save time. And let me remind our witnesses about the importance of brevity.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Nate Benferrato of the Southern Environmental Law Center. We support this bill, appreciate the delegates' work on it. I think it, in his opening remarks, really highlighted the need for this. I do a lot of work at the commission, and they are doing great work there. They held a great technical conference back in December trying to look at options, but I think this is something that has really not been talked about yet. The front-end review to make sure before utilities obligate themselves to serve these large-scale customers, to make sure someone is checking to make sure the grid can handle these. As the JLARC report noted, it is, under any of the scenarios they studied, very difficult or difficult to achieve. We don't know if we can build enough power lines and infrastructures to support this. And this is a way to ensure we do not run into problems like that.
Thank you, Mr. Benferrato. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. Peter Anderson with Appalachian Voices. Can't say it any better than Delegate Thomas, and Mr. Benferrato already said it, so we support the bill.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Kyle Hart. I'm with the National Parks Conservation Association. NPCA is very supportive of this bill, and we ask that you report. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Blair St. Ledger Olson with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. At the core of this bill is the intent to place energy experts within decisions that are impacting our energy grid. And for those reasons, we support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Bob Shippey with Sierra Club. We thank the patron for bringing this. I think the amendments actually make the bill even better, and we hope you'll pass it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Lillian Anderson with Virginia Conservation Network. We're the partnership of over 160 environmental organizations across Virginia, and we support this bill and thank the patron.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Victoria Higgins, Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, we support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Alexander McCauley, Piedmont Environmental Council, we support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Laura Gonzalez with Clean Virginia, and I think this is an opportunity to make sure that Virginians keep benefiting from the data center industry without putting in danger grid reliability or affordability. So we support the bill.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tanisha Griffin, and I'm the Environmental Policy Analyst with New Virginia Majority, and we also support the bill for the consumer protections therein. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to testify against this bill?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy. And we do oppose the bill. We think this would be an unprecedented step to make individual facilities go through what is basically amounts to a full-blown CPCN proceeding. And we would submit that that's a bridge too far. I'd also note that in the recent JLARC data center study, they noted that although demand growth does raise concerns, existing utility requirements and processes limit risks. Ultimately, the commission is going to have to approve and review any petition for new transmission, new facilities, a substation, and so ultimately the commission is going to make these decisions. We would just submit that maybe the timing of this bill is not the right time. So we would respectfully ask that you oppose the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Glenn Davis, Director, Department of Energy. The administration opposes this bill for a couple of reasons. The first is this is going to completely bog down the commission. Not only do they get involved in energy, but now they get involved in actually placement of a load in businesses. Additionally, they're going to be picking winners and losers. How do they decide between two 100-megawatt facilities when only 100 megawatt is available? It's not their position to be picking winners and losers. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, I think we're looking at this completely differently and maybe a little bit wrong. The patron's right, there's a mismatch in power supply and power demand. But the goal is not to look at VACIA and say we only have so much power, let's stop economic development and job growth. The goal is to look at VACIA and say how can we tweak VACIA to allow all the economic development that Virginia has ready to go and job growth really come to fruition. So I think the answer is tweaking VACIA, not stopping economic growth in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Vassy, Virginia Manufacturers Association. The reference was to the SEC just a few minutes ago. You all may not be aware that the technical conference, it actually is a proceeding. They've never done this before. They put a group of experts together, and the second round of comments aren't even due until tomorrow. So we don't know what the SEC's recommendations are going to be, but we have forgotten in 2023, we restored the SEC's ability to fully control rates and protect the grid. And they are fully prepared to do that. I think this gets ahead of them. I'll give you an example of why this gets ahead of them. You've talked about data centers, and this bill's intended to get at data centers. It does not just get data centers. You've brought manufacturers into this. We have never been part of a challenge of service or paying for our infrastructure, but this bill does bring us into it. So we ask that you pass this by, maybe send it as part of comments that are due tomorrow to the SEC, but we think that they can actually accomplish this.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Weber.
Question for Mr. Vassy. When you just said that, manufacturers and data centers, so you could in theory have a county that has approved a data center and then another county right adjoining to it that approved a manufacturing facility. And both would then submit their applications, and they'd be in competition for whatever power is left.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman. Yes, and further, we have manufacturers at 100 megawatts today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jason Parker, Building Trades, State of Virginia.
So let me interrupt you for just a second.
Yes,
Delegate Mundon King, did you want to speak? Okay. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Mr. Chair. The stalling projects is not good for the building trades. We would get enormous amounts of hours for the much needed workforce development as in our apprenticeships, as well as in those working families that actually work as the journeymen and wiremen and journeywomen of those particular projects. We feel like this would absolutely delay these projects to the point potentially to where they get out-costed or go somewhere else. And we think that Virginia needs to keep a very essential industry inside her borders. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. I'm Vince Barnett. I'm a senior leader at the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. We appreciate the work that the delegate has done on the bill. We did not receive an advance copy of the amendments, but here in the read, I think most of my comments remain true. However, we would like to look a little bit further. VDP is charged with bringing new jobs and investments to every corner of the state to make Virginia a great place to work, live, and raise a family. We compete globally to attract high-wage, high-quality jobs and investments. Some of the unintended consequences of this bill could signal to key sectors that we are targeting that our doors are closed. It was mentioned earlier, semiconductors and other type of sectors that are key to our potential growth could be impacted by this bill. Speed to market and certainty is essential to Virginia's economic development success. While we appreciate the role and effort of the SSC, this bill adds a layer of uncertainty by inserting an additional regulatory body and deciding whether a job creator can come to our state. That's an unprecedented burden few, if any, other states that we compete daily with for projects. In effect, we would be added months to the process of whether a facility can come to Virginia. 180 days in many instances is critical to a project decision. As a result, Virginia will lose economic development projects, and the impacts go beyond data centers, as we said earlier. There are a number of there are a number of recent notable project wins that would potentially have been impacted and potentially moved away from Virginia if this bill was enacted at that time. The Virginia Economic Development Partnership hopes that you will vote against the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, good afternoon. My name is Kate Smiley. I'm with the Data Center Coalition, which is an association of leading data center owners and operators. JLARC's mandate was pretty broad. I think it has been mentioned here that none of their 8 recommendations or 10 policy considerations ever came close to something like this. This would add to the extremely long list of permits that you already need to get from the state, local, federal level in order to operationalize here in Virginia. It adds a factor of uncertainty that absolutely would become an issue for a capital investment intensive industry for which certainty and predictability is very, very important. Finally, I want to note that the SEC under this bill would consider incredibly vague criteria. We're talking about things like weighing a project's contribution to economic development measured against whether the applicant has provided adequate information to the public and interested stakeholders. Defining any one of those aspects is going to be really, really challenging. That sort of risk creates confusion for prospective investors and may discourage them altogether. Ultimately, the broad criteria and considerations would also inevitably lead to legal challenges as the SEC starts issuing or denying certificates. Basically, we're concerned that this bill unnecessarily extends time to market for data centers here in Virginia, but other industries as well. Data centers, though, did collectively invest $24 billion in Virginia last year. So along with a number of other capital-intensive industries, this would create tremendous regulatory uncertainty and also risk signaling to businesses considering major economic investments in Virginia that their time and their money may be best invested elsewhere, all without demonstrable benefits that don't already exist through the SEC, DEQ, whatever the regulatory body is for Virginians. We respectfully ask you to vote against the bill. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Neil Gray, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We oppose this bill.
Now that's brevity. Way to go.
Good afternoon. Following that up, I'm Patrick Brigman with IBW Local 666. We also oppose the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Rob Bohannon, representing the Virginia Economic Developers Association, will align our remarks largely with VEDPs about concerns related to delays in economic development projects. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Elizabeth Rafferty here on behalf of the Northern Virginia Technology Council, and we also oppose this bill for the reasons already mentioned.
Mr. Chairman, Sarah Thomas on behalf of Virginia Association for Commercial Real Estate. We echo the concerns of the Data Center Coalition and oppose this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Preston Bryant of McGuire Consulting on behalf of DuPont. The DuPont facility in Chesterfield County is DuPont's largest plant in the world. It's more than 90 years old, employs a couple thousand employees. Even at the 100 megawatt threshold, this bill is very troubling for that facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of the panel for Delegate Thomas? Or Delegate Thomas, you want the last word?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. All I will say is I actually really understand a lot of the concerns that were just expressed from the opposition. I think there are a lot of real impacts on Virginia's economy. But one thing I will note is that not a single one had another answer. I mean, JLARC phrased and framed the problem very clearly, that this is a dire energy situation, and yet this bill has been the only potential solution put forward on how to constrain the load, which is going to have to be part of the problem. If we're going to meet our clean energy goals, we have to do something about the load in the next 2, 3, 4 years, because every year we wait, it just makes it that much harder to achieve. It's like running a race where the finish line keeps moving a quarter mile every year. And so I really hope that those in opposition can maybe put forward some of their own ideas about how we get there if today is not successful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Thomas. Any further discussion from members of the panel? Delegate Herring.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion. I move that we gently lay the bill on the table.
There's a motion to lay the bill on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion to lay the bill on the table properly seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, please open the roll. Go ahead and close the roll, please, sir. The motion to lay the bill on the table carries 9-0. Thank you, Delegate Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee. We will.
Next, Delegate Shin. You want to go up front? This is HB 2084. Delegate Shin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. Nice to see you all. I have before you HB 2084, which pertains to a similar topic on which we just heard. It seems to me like this JLARC report on data centers is going to be a popular subject of conversation this session. I think HB 2084 is pretty straightforward, and it directs the State Corporation Commission to conduct a regulatory proceeding to consider a separate customer classification for data centers. I think by now we've all heard 70% of the world's data comes through Virginia, and it is a pretty staggering statistic. Virginia has the largest concentration of data centers in the entire world. In Northern Virginia alone, there are 241 operational data centers and 111 more expected to come online in the next several years. And in just Loudoun County, you have more than 30 million square feet of operational data centers. The number of data centers in Virginia continues to grow at an exponential rate, projected to double, more than double by 2040. And so over the years, and as you heard from my colleague, Delegate Thomas, there is an anticipated exponential increase in load growth. While Virginia has historically enjoyed a relatively flat load growth, in recent years, I think we're seeing that line look more like a hockey stick. And as utility providers work to service the data center industry, building more infrastructure to service them, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is who is shouldering the burden of the cost, and are we making sure that that allocation is fair? This bill does not address the cost allocation or the formulas. It actually just says the SEC should consider what it might look like if we created a separate class, a customer class for data centers. Having heard directly from data centers, I've been lucky enough to tour some data centers up in my neck of the woods. And last year, I was able to even meet with some folks and talk about how they feel that they are paying their fair share. And even the JLARC report actually implies as much. I would ask that I just read this really quickly here, where it says, data centers are currently paying full cost of service. And the next line is, or the next subtitle is, growing energy demand from data centers is likely to increase other customers' costs. And so the JLARC study also goes on to say that creating a separate data center class, customer class, could allow costs to be more closely allocated to data centers and provide utilities with more flexibility over how to charge rates. With that in mind, The intention of this bill is to ensure that we are protecting residential ratepayers and other customers from shouldering the burden of costs associated with the booming data center industry. I understand that in some other states, including Ohio and North Carolina, regulators and utilities have proactively already started to implement separate rate classes for data centers because this industry is so incredibly unique and has quite a unique demand on energy. The reality is that, though, Virginia outpaces every other state in the country in operational data centers and what is projected to come online. So I'd like to see Virginia become a leader in the way that we can model good regulatory frameworks and structures for data centers. The JLARC report also says that the General Assembly could require Dominion to establish a separate data center customer class, although historically the legislature has not set such detailed requirements in statute. And so you'll see that this bill is structured in a way where we continue in this tradition most recently established to empower the SEC to conduct their business and rely on them as experts to regulate this industry and others. And so I'll end there for now. I will also add that I have some other work in progress, and so we're hoping to bring forward some additional amendments. You know, this is a moving target for me, and so while I hope it will continue to stay alive, we fight to live another day, or we live to fight another day, it is my hope that the subcommittee will look favorably upon this bill for right now and let us keep on moving.
Thank you, Delegate Shin. Are there any members of the panel with a question for Delegate Shin? Seeing none, let's turn to the audience. Oh, Delegate Weber?
Just real quick.
Delegate Weber.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in your piece of legislation, it says the commission shall seek public input and consult. So then the aforementioned, I guess the folks that are listed after are the ones that will provide kind of guidance as they develop that classification?
Mr. Chair, I would answer yes, that's correct, but it also says that any other persons the corporation might deem appropriate, and in code, I believe that leaves it pretty open for broad interpretation for the SEC to decide who is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the panel? Are there any members of the audience who want to testify in support of this bill? Mr. Anderson, good to see
Mr.
you.
Chair, members of the subcommittee, Peter Anderson with Appalachian Voices. We think this is a good policy. We support it. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the subcommittee. Kyle Hart, National Parks Conservation Association. Obviously, we support this bill. I'd like to address kind of the broader point around this whole thing and the bill y'all just heard, the Josh Thomas bill and others. I think there's an understanding that something has to give here. The JLARC report, you know, as Delegate Shin acknowledges that everyday ratepayers' bills are going to go up. I believe the JLARC report something like $444 a year, the average ratepayer. Dominion's recent IRP indicates sort of a similar increase. Something has to give here. Business as usual cannot go on indefinitely, and so for those reasons, we support this bill and any of the other bills that will be before you in the coming weeks to attempt to address this problem. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Jonathan Ward, representing HII Newport News Shipbuilding, and we'd like to associate our comments with the delegates' thought on continuing the conversation because we believe that it is something that we need to continue to look into. So we would appreciate your support of the bill and appreciate our bringing it.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Dana Wiggins with the Virginia Poverty Law Center. And we're thankful for Delegate Shin to be thinking about how these things may impact residential ratepayers. And we're happy to work with her as this bill evolves to make sure that it's structured in a way that actually does that. So thank you very much. And thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Wiggins. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to testify against the bill? Mr. Director.
Yes, sir. And realizing we might have more than 60 seconds, I'll slow down a little bit this time. So Mr. Chairman, the administration is against this bill. There's a concern that there could be legal implications being discriminatory against data centers, essentially treating data centers differently than other entities with the same and similar loads. Last year, there was a case that FERC dealt with where Basin Electric in North Dakota actually was trying to discriminate against Bitcoin mining operations. And FERC found that they were not just and reasonable in their discrimination there. Presently, there is a case with the Ohio Utilities Commission where they are actually dealing with a situation now where Ohio is looking to discriminate against data centers differently than other loads. That case is ongoing and will find its way possibly on appeal up through the Ohio Supreme Court. So our caution here is to be careful treating data centers differently than similar loads, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy. And we do have concern with the bill as drafted, but we think that those concerns are resolvable. We believe the commission already has the authority to do this, and in fact, they could do it in the biennial review, which will be later this year. Again, we do think these issues are resolvable, and we appreciate the patron working with us to resolve this, hopefully by the full committee. And we want to ensure that we're not dictating to the commission how and when to set rates, and that's a discussion that we continue to have, and so we look forward to hopefully seeing that in the next iteration of the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. Kate Smiley again with the Data Center Coalition. I want to start by emphasizing that our member companies are committed to paying their full cost of service for power. As a part of their broad look at the data center industry last year, JLARC commissioned an independent study of electric utility cost recoveries under current rate structures. The study found, and I quote, "Current rates appropriately allocate costs to the customers responsible for incurring them, including data center customers." Notably, JLARC's 8 recommendations and 10 policy considerations didn't include a recommendation that the General Assembly direct the SEC to create a new customer class exclusively for data centers. As it's currently drafted, this bill would both begin the proceeding and leapfrog the SEC to the conclusion. I'll note that in the 2 states where regulatory bodies are looking at a separate rate class for data centers, it was the regulators that began that discussion. It was not a directive from the legislature. The JLARC report also reads, "Utility cost allocation and rate design are complex and highly technical. The practicality and legality of any changes require detailed analysis to be fully understood. For this reason, utilities and SEC are in the best position to address future cost concerns through cost allocation and rate design. SEC is proactively looking into the cost concerns from the data center industry and scheduled a technical conference on December 16th, 2024. The SEC has the authority. They have the processes in place. They routinely examine cost allocation and rate design to ensure that they are fair and reasonable and that residents, like your everyday Virginians, are protected. Notwithstanding the SEC's existing authority, their December 16th technical conference and the rate case Dominion will be filing shortly in March with the SEC. This bill would direct the SEC to launch a new regulatory proceeding and establish a new data center specific rate class. And I will note that singling out one particular type of customer or industry for disparate treatment with electricity rates is unprecedented and runs counter to the long-established sound rate-making principles that have served Virginia and our nation well in both times of flat electricity demand and load growth. Rate classes should ultimately be established based on load characteristics rather than the business in which the customer is engaged. These costs caused by a rate class are driven by its aggregate load shape, the volume of power it consumes, the number of customers served, not the business or end use per se that its power consumption supports. So to reiterate, the data center industry is committed to paying the full cost of service, its full cost of service, and as the JLARC study clearly found, the industry has paid its full share of costs to date. We respectfully, with that in mind, and the fact that the SEC has existing authority and processes in place, ask that you vote against HB 2084. Thank you.
Delegate Mundy King, did you have a question for the witness?
No, I just want to speak to the bill at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to testify against the bill? Delegate Shin, you want the last word?
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things I wanted to address. So I would say that treating data centers differently does not necessarily discriminate against them as customers. I think it was brought up that, that would be an unprecedented move, but I think the data center industry itself is unprecedented here in the Commonwealth and calls for unprecedented actions from us. That doesn't make it radical or extreme. It just means that we're trying to keep up with the booming nature of this industry and the demand that comes from it. I would also argue that this bill still leaves the authority with the Commission. It doesn't do anything to thwart them or to undermine them, and that is the intent of the bill, to allow them to operate and in their full authority, as it is their job to do. The JLARC report also states, and I just wanted to clarify for the record here, that while it does state that the data centers are currently paying the full cost of service, that has not been examined by the SEC before, and so no shade to the JLARC or to the consultants that helped on this report, but I think that that's a determination that I'd like to see made by the SEC before we conclude that to be complete truth. Additionally, growing energy demand from data centers is likely to increase other customer costs. That seems like a given. And I would say that while it was not like a policy recommendation that was called out in this report, it literally says, establishing a separate data center customer class is a first step utilities could take to help insulate residential and other customers from the energy cost impacts of the industry. So I would argue that the idea that JLAC doesn't think that a separate customer class is necessary is not accurate. And I would point you to the report to see that.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Mundy King, did you have a question or a comment?
Just a comment, and I think I want to thank the delegate for bringing this forward. And I think you covered much of what I wanted to say, but I do just want to say that on this committee, I've been supportive of data centers and, grateful for the investments that they're making in our communities. However, just want to be clear, this idea of poor data centers being discriminated against is really something that we should shy away from. We have a responsibility to be great partners with people who are investing in the Commonwealth, but our first responsibility is to the safety and well-being of the citizens of the Commonwealth. And this idea of affirmative action for data centers is just a little mind-blowing. So I would just keep that in mind as we're continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Delegate Mundy King.
Thank you, Delegate. Any other comments or questions from members of the committee relating to HB 2084? Committee operates on motion.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
Delegate Herring.
I move that we report the legislation to full committee without recommendation, and speaking to that motion.
Delegate Herring.
Mr. Chair, I do have concerns, is my understanding that the SCC is working on the issue, but in the interest of, the delegate continuing to work with stakeholders, which I think is important, and there was representations that they're trying to work on some language. I think she should be given the opportunity to amend her bill and have the opportunity to work on it. Plain stop. So.
Thank you, Delegate Herring.
Okay.
Is there a second to the motion? Second. Motion's been properly made and seconded. Any further discussion from members of the committee? Mr. Clerk, please open the roll.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Delegate Gilbert?
Could someone enlighten me about
let's make sure, let's close.
What are we doing procedurally?
The motion was to report without recommendation.
Okay, so what is this, Mr. Chair?
This is a vote on that motion.
This says report.
we can change that to make clear, the record is very clear what we're doing. but we're
Parliamentary
happy to-
inquiry, how do we vote to report without recommendation if we're essentially making a recommendation?
The motion, I'm happy to ask the clerk to change the designation at the top of the roll to put in writing what we have said orally, which is that we're reporting it without recommendation, sending it to the full committee without recommendation. Can you redo that?
Would that be a recorded vote?
I have no such motion. What you can do is, at your, on the meeting next Tuesday, you can say what you just said here. You know, get on the docket, and the chairman can take it up in full, if she so desires. But I don't have a motion. There's no technical thing. It's just, that's a thing you as a chairman to chairman would say, okay, we like this, but we know there's some work to do. We ask that you take this into full. And let the chairman.
So Delegate Gilbert, in response to your question, I think the motion is proper, and I take it as my duty as the chair of the subcommittee to, when I report the bill to the full committee, to make that very clear to the entire committee that we passed it on those terms and without recommendation to the full committee.
I mean, I'll open back up because I closed it. I cleared it. If you want to report it, I can do that.
Just ask the board to put it on the docket, and then we'll take it up in full. I don't need a motion. I agree. The Uber chair can pull it out of the subcommittee at any point she wants.
Okay. All right.
That's
I can't make that motion.
Move to report?
No, she's got to, we had a motion that we were discussing, she's got to withdraw that first.
Right.
Okay.
That's my point. It's parliamentary to Gilbert's point. There's no such motion.
So then there is no motion made right now.
There is.
So somebody can make.
He can make a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman? Move to
Delegate Lopez.
Move to report.
Second.
We have a motion to report the bill properly. Second. Clerk, please open the roll. Please close the roll. The bill reports 6-4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Shin. Members of the committee, I'm going to call my own number here, HB 1779, and ask Delegate Herring to take over the gavel.
Delegate Sullivan, or Chair Sullivan, whenever you're ready.
Delegate works just fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the panel, this is HB 1779, a bill I'm really excited to bring before you. Fusion power has the potential to be a fundamentally new clean source of energy. You know, historically, fusion has been way off in the future. But currently, many governments and private sector companies around the world are getting closer to developing technology to generate fusion power on a commercial scale. One such company is now new to Virginia, and it is called Commonwealth Fusion Systems. About a month ago, CFS, which is currently located in Devens, Massachusetts, and is the largest private fusion company in the world, founded in 2018, with over 1,000 companies and more than $2 billion in capital invested. Last month, CFS and Virginia made global news when CFS announced that they would be constructing the world's first fusion power plant right here in Chesterfield County. It's going to be located on the James River Industrial, or in the James River Industrial Park in Chesterfield County on a site owned by Dominion. It's going to construct a 400 megawatt unit, will create lots and lots of jobs, and it will start in late 2027 or early 2028. The power plant is expected to be operational in the early 2030s. Now, I want to take you back to 9th grade physics class, members of the panel. Fusion is the physical process that powers the sun and other stars in the universe. It occurs when atoms like hydrogen combine to form heavier atoms like helium. The process releases tremendous amounts of energy. And a fusion power plant, which is actually a machine, uses powerful magnets to confine and control the fusion fuel. Fusion is not fission. Fission is what we all commonly know and refer to as nuclear power, where atoms are split. They're split apart to create energy, and a neutron collides with a uranium atom and splits it. Fusion is the exact opposite. It's where atomic nuclei are combined to create energy, and two light nuclei combine to form a single heavy nucleus. Fusion energy is safe. There's no possibility of a runaway chain reaction, no possibility of a meltdown. It does not have any long-lived radioactive waste, which is so worrisome in other situations. And there are two forms of hydrogen: tritium, which is a weakly radioactive hydrogen isotope. It breaks down in a little over 12 years. And deuterium, which is a stable hydrogen isotope and non-toxic. A fusion plant releases zero carbon dioxide or any other greenhouse gas. It's clean, safe, reliable, abundant power. This bill is brought to you because fusion has never been commercialized on a commercialized scale. The Virginia Code just has no definition of what fusion is. And this bill provides that simple definition for future use in our code. Simply that fusion energy means the energy generated through the process of fusing together two atomic nuclei. That's important as we move forward because Virginia is going to be the world's first fusion power plant, and this just lays the foundation for someday having that more fully in our code. I'm proud to say that when CFS was deciding where to locate the world's first fusion power plant and decided on Virginia, they engaged with lots and lots of local and state environmental organizations, as well as local and state business leaders. It has spent time talking to local government officials and state government officials, including numerous members, of course, of our General Assembly. During its due diligence, CFS received lots of positive feedback from environmental organizations, business leaders, and local and state government officials. It's fair to say that the reception for CFS has been uniformly positive, and I certainly am a part of that group that welcomes them to Virginia. So this bill is brought as sort of the process of welcoming CFS to Virginia, and I hope you will approve the bill.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, in short, because the bill is one line.
Very short.
Very short. It's fusing. We have a business.
I think this is the shortest bill I've ever had, Delegate Weber.
This is the shortest bill you've ever had, and I like this bill. So, so in short, it's the love nuclear, not the divorce nuclear.
That's an interesting characterization. That is correct. It fuses together rather than splits apart.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
What happens at North Anna is fission. Fusion is something very, very different. And I've, as you might expect, got some people behind me who are going to be able to explain it much better than they didn't teach this in law school.
That's why I farm.
Yeah. Any other questions from the committee? All right, we'll hear from those who are supporting this bill.
Faster, quick.
You got one more bill, though, too.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Preston Bryant on McGuire Consulting on behalf of Commonwealth Fusion Systems. We are very excited about Virginia being home to the world's first fusion power plant. This bill is simple, but it's very important. It's truly foundational, and we hope you will support the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy. We support this bill. We're very excited about our partnership in Chesterfield that will have no ratepayer impact. So we'd ask that you support the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Josephus Allman with the Southern Environmental Law Center. We were actually fortunate enough to meet with Commonwealth Fusion Systems. Was really appreciative with their early outreach to the community and excited about this clean technology. We support the bill.
Glenn Davis, Director of the Department of Energy. I'm very excited to stand alongside my good friend on this bill. And we don't just support this bill because of how great of a guy he is, how much we like him, but we actually, there's 81 instances of nuclear in the Code of Virginia. Typically, and not typically, but it means fission in the Code of Virginia. We went through each one to make sure there was no unintended consequences. Also looked at federal legislation, both existing and new, and there's a move at the federal level to define fusion in a similar manner, so it would keep us consistent with the federal government as well.
Madam Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Thomas Turner with Conservatives for Clean Energy. We support this legislation and thank the patron for his work.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Jonathan Ward, HII, Newport News Shipbuilding. We, as a supporter of fission and fusion, we support your bill, sir. Thank you.
All right. There's no one online, correct?
No.
All right.
Move to report.
Wait, I think we have to do opposition. I'll just call for anyone opposing this bill.
I withdraw my motion.
All right.
And now I renew it.
All right.
Second.
It's been properly motioned and second that this bill be reported. All those wishing to vote, please do so on electronic voting board. All right. Oh, guess the patron needs to vote. Okay. Oh, the bill reports 10-0.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Finally, HB 2113 from Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. HB 2113 is dealing with creating a solar grant interconnection grant fund. A potential major cost when developing any solar project is the cost of connecting the new power source into the existing power grid, which often requires extensive infrastructure upgrades to ensure electrical worker safety and grid stability for existing customers. Interconnection costs are often not known until late into the project development, and several projects have been delayed or halted because the costs are unknown, wasting valuable time, money, and project opportunities. This bill, the fix, is a rooftop and mid-sized solar projects, as background, of course, increase clean energy usage, have millions of taxpayer dollars in utility costs by decreasing power costs, and provide long-term sustainable power generation capability to the power grid. By providing a state-sponsored subsidy grants for localities to offset unexpected interconnection costs will help keep existing planned projects moving while we work to address longer-term issues related to our renewable energy transition efforts. This bill establishes the Solar Interconnection Grant Fund and Program, which will award grants on a competitive basis to public bodies like localities and school boards to offset their costs associated with connecting new solar facilities. I'm going to make this very brief, Mr. Chair, because I know everyone's tired, but basically that's it. It's the creation of a fund. It's non-reverting. I do have people here, and I'm just going to tell you, and you all probably read in newspapers, our schools are having problems. They're trying to put solar on. They're facing cost issues. And so, for example, Alexandria, Prince William, and Henrico. And I think it's probably more efficient if I defer to them, have them come speak, And I think we have someone online as well.
We do. We'll get to the online. Delegate Weber had a question.
Just real quick, so this bill only applies to public bodies, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other member of the panel have a question for Delegate Herring? Let's hear from the audience. Is there anyone here to testify in favor of this bill? Good evening.
Good evening. It's still afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kathy Bircher on behalf of Alexandria City Public Schools. We're grateful to Delegate Herring for bringing this bill forward. We do have school board member Dr. Ashley Simpson-Baird to testify virtually, but again, to reiterate, 2 projects in Alexandria City Public Schools had an unexpected cost of over $1.4 million and resulted in delays of 14 months for one project and 20 months for another project. So I know Dr. Simpson-Baird is happy at the end to give you a little more information, but we are very grateful and supportive of the bill.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lurch.
Joe Lurch, representing the Virginia Association of Counties, in support of the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Kyle Shreve, on behalf of the Virginia Forestry Association, we support the bill and appreciate the delegate bringing forward a bill that prioritizes developed land schools for solar development. Thank you.
Rachel Henley, Chair. Thank you, committee, and thank you for the patron. I'm Rachel Henley with Virginia Farm Bureau. We appreciate the patron bringing this forward, especially with competitive prioritization of previously disturbed lands and for supporting localities. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan with Seven Hills on behalf of Dominion Energy, and we support the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Michael Malloy, Fairfax County Schools. We have exactly the same issues that Alexandria City and other school divisions are facing in terms of the unexpected costs of deploying solar. So we very much appreciate the delegate's bill and support it.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Josephus Allman with the Southern Environmental Law Center. We've been involved in the interconnection dockets at the SEC for the past few years. And these interconnection costs are serious issues, especially for school projects. So we support the bill. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Dana Wiggins with the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and we thank the delegate and we support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we get to we do have some people online. Is there anyone in the room who wants to testify against the bill? Seeing none, let's go. Is Ms. Simpson-Baird on the line?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Sullivan and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Simpson-Baird, and I'm a proud member of the Alexandria City School Board. I'm here today to express my strong support for Delegate Charnel Herring's Bill 2113, which establishes the Solar Interconnection Grant Fund and Program. I've been told I need to be brief, which you know is difficult for us elected officials, but I do want to highlight 2 projects that we have built in recent years. First is, as Ms. Bircher mentioned before, our newly modernized Douglas MacArthur Elementary School, which opened in 2023. This was built with a photovoltaic array, and Dominion has estimated that the interconnection costs for this building are $104,500, and they estimate that it will take 14 months to complete the solar integration for that school. This school is already open, it's up and running, and was built under our city's green building policy, which requires schools or any new build to be a net zero facility, which this building was designed to do. Similarly, this past fall, we opened the mini Howard campus of our Alexandria City High School, and this is also designed with a photovoltaic array. It's a secondary school, so it's much bigger, and Dominion's required fiber connection directly to the substation will cost $1.37 million and take 20 months to complete. So all that being said, we also have several schools that are coming in the next 5 to 10 years that will be modernized and will be built to these standards. So we are really looking to get this bill passed so that we can have support in getting those solar panels connected. I also just want to reiterate, we appreciate the prioritization of projects on previously developed sites. We are a small city with not a lot of places to build, so we are rebuilding schools on their existing sites in very densely populated areas. Thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Is Jessica Weimer on the line? Ms. Weimer?
Hi, yes.
There you are.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jessica Weimer, and I am the Supervisor of Energy and Sustainability for Prince William County Public Schools. Being the second largest school division in the Commonwealth, we serve 90,000 students across 100 facilities. We are aiming to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and support sustainability with renewable energy projects. We recently installed solar at 6 schools, which were not impacted by the interconnection fee. However, expanding further is becoming challenging due to those high interconnection fees with one of our utility providers. So, for example, as some of our other counterparts have shared, fees at one of our high schools could cost over $1 million over the 25-year period. Fees like this would take money away from other educational programs and cut our utility savings by half. We appreciate the efforts that are being made to address this, including the potential funding avenues for interconnection fees included in this bill. However, for us, a competitive grant-funded program may not provide all of the certainty that we need to move forward with additional projects that may face interconnection fees. So we do urge that you consider this and other robust solutions to help school divisions like ours and others that spoke this evening support our regional climate and emissions goals without compromising our financial responsibilities to our taxpayers. Thank you so much for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Weimer, and my apologies for mispronouncing your name. Delegate Herring, you want the last word?
Only, I hope that you all support the bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion from the committee? Any motions from the committee?
Move to report.
Second.
Been moved to report and properly seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Clerk, would you please open the roll? Oh, hold on. Oh, hold on.
Substitute.
Destroy the roll.
Substitute.
Yeah, this does need to go to appropriations. Thank you,
Substitute
Marie.
motion, Mr. Chairman. Move to report.
Delegate, yeah, no, it was right here. Delegate Lopez.
Move to report and refer to appropriations.
Is there a second? All right, properly moved and seconded that we report it and send to appropriations. Please open the roll. On the very last vote. Here we go. Please close the roll. Bill refers and to appropriations by a vote of 7-3. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, members of the panel. We are adjourned. One note of sort of public interest, we will meet twice next week on Tuesday and Thursday. See you all on Tuesday.